Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum, dear students. Our current session is about code switching and sociolinguistics. I hope and expect by the end of this session you would be able to understand the term code switching, and you would also be able to understand how it is significant in sociolinguistics. Well, my dear students, I hope and expect that you already know what is a code. Just to refresh our memory, I would say a code is a dialect or a language that a person chooses to use on any occasion. So, code is a neutral term, it is an umbrella term, it is a general term that is used for any dialect, for any language. Code can also be defined as a system that is used for communication between two or more than two people. This is another technical definition which makes it clear that when, for the purposes of communication, more than one persons, that is two or more than two people, when they use, any system, we can call it a code. When we look at the ground realities of how codes are used in this world, we can say that generally speaking, one person knows more than one codes, which means one person knows more than one languages or more than one dialects, or sometimes one language and one dialect, sometimes two languages, two dialects, two languages, one dialect, or any combination that is more than one. Well, to this point, so far it seems that the situation or the idea is very simple. Knowing a language and using a language is a simple idea. But when we take it further, it gets starting complicated. When a person has more than one languages, it is not only having two separate identities or having two separate entities of language or having two separate systems of codes using code A or using code B. No, there are certain processes where they mix up. There are certain processes where they overlap. There are certain processes where there are switches from one to the other. So in this particular session, what we are focusing on is this switch from one code to the other. So, people may switch from one code to the other, though they may mix codes within sometimes very short utterances, and sometimes, in this process, they create a more or less like a new code. This process of shifting from one language to the other, or from one dialect to the other, or from one language to another dialect, in the course of, discourse, or in the course of conversation, or in the course of interaction, this is what is called code switching. Well, my dear students, code switching is a linguistic strategy. This is a strategy that is used by bilinguals or multilinguals as speakers to make switches from one or from two to more than two languages, thus shifting from one to the other depending upon audience, depending upon the settings, and depending upon the purposes or the intention of the interaction. There are certain definitions of code switching that I would like to share with you. For example, if you look at the screen, this is a definition by Gumpers, and this definition says, code switching can be called the juxtaposition within the same speech exchange of passages of speech belonging to two different grammatical systems or subsystems. So, each system that is used as a system of communication, that is a code, can be a language or can be a dialect. It has its completely separate set of rules and regulations. It has its own grammar, it has its own system, and this switch is made from, one system to the other. According to Yoa 1997, within a single communicative exchange, the use of more than one language is called code switching. Now, in this definition, what I want to point out is within a single communicative exchange. Now, this is important. Because at this moment, what we are talking about as the term code switching is not, in one situation using one language and then going to some other place, or being in some other situation and then using another language. We here, according to this definition, are talking about switching from one code to the other, that is from one language or dialect to the other, within one interaction, within one exchange, within one, process of communication. Titan 1991 asserts, code switching may take a variety of forms. A set of utterances in one language is followed by a set of utterances in the other. The single utterance in one language is followed by one single utterance in another. Let me give you an example. For example, English and Urdu. Now let me speak something where there would be switches. For example, oh hello, how are you? आज कितने दिनों के बाद मिल रही हो? So, oh hello, how are you? आज कितने दिनों के बाद मिल रही हो? This complete switch from English to Urdu within one exchange. In one go I have said that. In one interaction I have said that. This switch from one code, that is from one language English to the other language Urdu, is an instance of that. Code switching is more like a global phenomenon, I would say, today. And almost in all the countries of the world, some kind of code switching takes place as the speakers, the bilingual and multilingual speakers, speak. Here I would give you the example of Singapore, a multilingual country. Here the ability to shift from one language to the other is considered to be very normal. Here 4 official languages are used in Singapore. English language is used, Mandarin, variety of Chinese is used, Tamil language is used, and then Malay is used, which is also the national language of, Singapore. So, people almost know all these 4 languages, and during the conversations, depending upon the setting, depending upon the audience, depending upon the situation, the context, the issues of identity, how do they want to represent themselves, etc. People keep on switching, and this is considered to be very, very normal. However, there is another aspect apart from these 4 languages. Majority of the people, they are speakers of Hokkien, that is another variety of Chinese language. If we look at the totality of the situation in terms of prestige attached to different languages, well, the government policies, the national policies, they promote the use of English as a language of trade. Mandarin is, promoted as an international Chinese language when it comes to the Chinese identity. Malay is used as a language of this particular region. This is more like a regional language. So, different kind of identities are being created through different languages, and people switch from one language to the other when they want to switch from one particular identity to the next identity, to the other identity. So in this situation, Tamil is also used. It is one of the important languages of one of the important ethnic groups in the Republic. So, depending upon who you are, with whom you are interacting, for which purpose you are interacting, what kind of identity you want to represent, where do you belong to, and what do you want to show that you want to belong to where, what is your intention of that conversation, what is the purpose of that conversation or interaction. Depending on all that, the switches take place. So, what this means for a typical Chinese child growing up in Singapore. He or she is likely to speak Hokkien with parents, informal Singapore English with siblings. Conversations with friends would be in Hokkien language. The language of education will be the local standard variety of English, that is the standard Singaporean English and Mandarin. And whenever there are any religious practices, religious gatherings, etc., they will be conducted in standard Singapore English if the family is Christian. But in Hokkien language, if the family is not Christian, if they are Buddhists or they are Taoists. The language for the employers, the government employers, as they work in offices, is again standard Singapore English. But sometimes they would use Mandarin as well. From time to time they would switch to that. If Such a child growing up here has to live in this society, has to go for shopping. The shopping will be carried out in Hokkien language. Singlish, that is Singaporean and English mix, and the bazaar variety of Malay that is used throughout the region. So, the linguistic situation overall, you can see, is very, very complex and very, very complicated, and the processes of code switching keep on taking place. People keep on switching from any of these languages to the other, coming back, going forth, in making choices by switching from one language to the other to yet another, depending upon the situations and needs of interaction. Well, my dear students, when it comes to different types of switching, sometimes code switching is used as an umbrella term. And it is thought that this covers, different other terms under it. Actually, this is one of those terms in sociolinguistics that is very ambiguous, that is not very clear. So the main types of code switching are intra-sentential switching, inter-sentential switching, and tag switching. However, in this session, we have just focused on, inter-sentential, the number 2. Here, that is inter-sentential, because intra-sentential is within one sentence, which is also called code mixing and which needs to be dealt with separately. In the same way, tag switching is a particular kind of switch that needs to be dealt with separately. Here the focus is on, the second type, that is inter-sentential switching, between the sentences switching from one language to the other between the sentences, which means one sentence or two sentences are in one language or dialect, and then there is a shift to the other. So, this is the general idea of code switching that I hope now you understand.